Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 63, Carnival of Souls, directed by Herk Harvey in 1962. Now, the previous one is about the pinnacle of not just silent cinema, but I would say cinema as a whole. This is a different kind of pinnacle. Now let's go into the B movie territory. I'm a fan. I'm not sure if I haven't said this already. I'm going to say this now. One of my favorite television shows was Mystery Science Theater 3000, and I credit that for giving me a lot of my humor, particularly the sort of snarky, sardonic, wisecrack, riffing type of humor. So I'm fully aware of what MST3K does, and I also know about, and because of that show, it introduces me to that other side of the spectrum as far as cinema is concerned. The short and sweet answer I like to give as far as what kind of movies do you like, what kind of films do you like, I say, well, for me, my collection and my experience consist of the Criterion Collection on one end, and Mystery Science Theater 3000 on the other, and then everything in between. So this is one of those cases where it kind of goes like this, where the two ends just kind of meet, or maybe it's more like that, or something. But anyways, Carnival of Souls. It's okay. Let's just get this out of the way. It's not the greatest film in the world. There are some problems. There are some technical mishaps, particularly when it comes to sound. The sound mixing is not quite as elegant in certain parts. This is especially the case with some post-sync dubbing that was done. There's a few other little flubs here and there, but I will say this: it is competently shot, and there's even a lot of interesting shots. Some of the pacing is a little bit off, and there's some dialogue. The dialogue gets to be somewhat inconsistent. Sometimes it feels a little bit more natural, and then other times you feel like it's just belaboring the point. So it can be a little bit hit and miss as far as the writing. It's also kind of hit and miss as far as the acting is concerned, and also there's some inconsistencies with the editing, like particularly when it switches between various shot scales within a scene, it doesn't feel like it flows particularly well. And I don't know if it was just the way that it was shot. I think it was more like the way I'm not sure if there's any storyboarding that was done prior to it, or if the blocking was determined right then and there, but the transitions between various shot scales within a scene that happens a few times doesn't necessarily flow very well. So there are some flaws, there are some problems, and I think it's because of those things that put it on a B level category. That said, it's still really good, and in fact very inspiring. Now, what makes Carnival of Souls so great? Well, first off, Carnival of Souls was Herk Harvey and the film's writer John Clifford. They were both employees of Centron Corporation. Now, this is the reason why I mentioned MST3K in the first place. You know, if you've seen enough MST3K episodes, especially the short films that they riffed on, you recognize the name. Thank you, Centron. They were in fact a industrial short film, and no, I do not mean the musical genre at all, but these were they were a firm that made short films. They were often used in schools. Basically, all those horrid short films that you had to watch at a certain point in your education. There were companies that made these, and Centron was one of them. And they were based in Lawrence, Kansas. And who knew that Lawrence, Kansas would be a hotbed of creativity? I know Lawrence, Kansas for two reasons. Centron Corporation, and particularly Herk Harvey, and the musical group, the Appleseed Cast. Who knew? Who says you have to go to New York or Los Angeles in order to be creative? So you can do this. You can do this in Kansas, of all places. But I digress. But Carnival of Souls was not a Centron production. This was not made by the corporations. Although it was directed, it was written, produced, and directed by two employees of the company. This was very much an independent production. It also ended up being the only production that Herk Harvey did. Oh, by the way, going back to Centron a little bit, if you've seen several of the MST3K shorts, you have seen Herk Harvey before. One short that comes to mind is the ones concerning speech. If you see a guy, particularly the speech film talking all about platform posture and making the knee test. Okay, the guy with the part gouged into his skull, that's Herk Harvey. He also appears in Carnival of Souls, but that's so. Going back to that film, the story goes with Carnival of Souls is it starts off with a fairly innocent drag racing venture in Kansas. Apparently, you can do drag racing in Kansas too, and it goes horribly wrong when the car goes over the bridge into the Kansas River, and so they're trying. So at the scene, they're trying to fish the car out. They're trying to figure out what's going on, and then out from the mud emerges this woman, Mary Henry, played by Candice Hilligoss. She emerges out of the water all muddy and everything and clearly in shock. And so she's taken in. And then you find out that she was trained as an organist. And she accepted a job as a church organist over in Salt Lake City. Yes, there are other churches besides the Mormons in Utah. And so she drives from although it's never established. I think it's clearly supposed to be Lawrence, Kansas. And secret, it's not entirely filmed at Salt Lake City. But I will tell you where it does play a role. But anyways, so she goes over to Salt Lake City, but as she's driving, she first sees this mysterious, ghoulish figure known simply as the Man. Yes, this is a film where someone is hounded by the Man. And this man, by the way, is played by Herk Harvey in this very ghoulish white makeup. And he first appears in the road and near this old, mysterious, abandoned pavilion, which is actually Salt Air. This was the Mormons' attempt to do a kind of theme park. Before there was Disneyland, there was Salt Air, and and it was a big deal when it was built, and then it became less of a big deal when the lake was receding. And then it turned into a dance pavilion, and then it got abandoned, and then now that location is still it was completely remodeled. That the architecture that you see in that location is no longer there. That sort of I don't know what they were going for, but that style is no longer there. But the location is still there, but it's just used for very limited reasons. But and actually, that was the genesis of the whole film project. Was Herk Harvey was driving back on vacation, and he passed by this pavilion, and he was very intrigued by it, and he wanted to do something with that location, and so that was the genesis of Carnival of Souls, was that location. So anyway, so she arrives at Salt Lake City. She goes into the church. It's okay. She has a room, and it's kind of okay. And it's established early on that she is a very, very reserved, very cold, distant kind of woman, and you don't really know if she's just more intellectual and not very emotional. At one point she describes her job working at a church as, she describes a church as a place of business, whereas most people would be like, how dare you call it a place of business? And I would say that there are some times where a church acts like it's a place of business, and both for good and ill, mostly the latter, but I digress. She keeps very much to herself and, very, very isolated. But at the same time, there's also these reoccurrences of the man. The man keeps showing up, and this upsets her, and of course, and it baffles everyone else because, like, who is this guy you're talking about? Oh yeah, another character that shows up is the other tenant in this house. It's played by Sidney Berger, who was famously described by Roger Ebert as being a nerd in lust. So if you ever want to see a nerd in lust, and then afterwards never again, go see Carnival of Souls and go see his performance. But anyways, but then it all reaches, and so it's a combination of these appearances of the man, this fascination with with the Salt Air Pavilion. It leads and various other little strange occurrences. I don't want to give too much away because it really is something to behold. And here's why. It's because for Harvey and also Clifford as well, they wanted to make a film. This has been oft quoted by them. They wanted to make a film that had the look of a Bergman but the feel of a Cocteau. So these were people that had some genuine artistic aspirations, and these are people who knew who Bergman and Cocteau was. This was, art house was a popular thing, and Bergman was certainly certainly in the crowd in that one, and Cocteau was in general was inspiring in that respect through films like Beauty and the Beast and Orphée. So, but what makes this interesting is that these are people who work for an industrial short film firm based in Lawrence, Kansas. These are not people that, this is not LA, this is not New York, this is Lawrence, Kansas. And I think that's what makes it really, really inspiring from a filmmaking standpoint, is that these are two people that had the ambitions, they had the experience in doing this. Of course, they were working for Centron, so they knew the technical process. This was not someone who didn't know anything about filmmaking and picks it up. They've actually had some training, and this is why, in spite of all the technical flubs that I've pointed out, it still comes off as competently shot and competently made. So clearly this is not a case where these are people who had no idea what they were doing, unlike, say, an Ed Wood, or much more recently, Tommy Wiseau and James Gwynn. I mean, these were people that actually knew what they were doing. So this is actually why, while it's still in the B category as far as filmmaking, it's still very well made. You don't see incompetence, and any kind of flubs can be. It was either just due to, you know, it was a short-sighted mistake or whatever the case may be. They can be forgiven in that regard. There's nothing terribly egregious. There's just something where you can say that, you know, I think that could have been done a little bit better. So that's a fine mistake to have. I mean, there are much worse mistakes you can make in filmmaking. So that's what makes it inspiring. Is this aim, this model, as far as filmmakers, you know, we want to be like these filmmakers. It was built around this particular location that captured Herk Harvey's interest, and he wanted to do something with it. And that was, and if you can, and usually the best films, not exclusively, but the best films are often built around an interesting location. And Saltaire is an interesting location in and of itself, and it was used for great effect. I mean, it was not used, so it had this air of. I mean, it was a ghost house without it looking like a ghost house, which leads into, for a film that was again in the B category, that didn't have the best initial release. It was actually when it was theatrically released, it was done as a double feature, but it was only after it was shown on late night television as part of, Adventure Time or Scare Time, whatever kind of local movie programming that was done, and that was where the cult following started to happen. And you really get the sense that, and I think what's great about Carnival of Souls is that it did anticipate some other similar films that were made. So you can even call this film influential. When you look at this, particularly given the toe link, and also I think would say the Bergman, but when you watch it, you almost feel like you're watching something that would sit very well with David Lynch. And although I have not seen this, I've been told that you also get George A. Romero as well. I've not seen Night of the Living Dead yet. Remember that word, yet. So it's that sort of mysterious, not dependent on gore, not dependent on sort of obviously scary, but it's more about atmosphere. It's this unsettling thing that just lingers. It's the presence of ghosts, which also I think anticipates another horror classic and one of my favorites in the genre, The Shining. And it's so think about this. So think about with Carnival of Souls, and then in relation to The Shining, there's a lot of eerie similarities. This of course the difference is the Overlook is not abandoned; it's continually in use, but it's also a place that has a history, and the echoes of that history linger, and the right people can perceive that. So it's not quite the same thing, but it's that idea that a location has a spiritual dimension, or has an otherworldly dimension. It's not just what you see in the surface. There's something that call it a presence, call it an air, call it a mystique, something that you can't obviously see and sense, but you sense that it's there. That's what Carnival of Souls captures, I think, really well. In spite of the technical, again, in spite of the technical imperfections, it is a remarkably inspiring film. Just in terms of what it sets off, and also just the idea that it's not just Hollywood that makes films. It's not just, that anybody with the desire and the means and the capabilities can really make a film. And of course, it helps to have some technical understanding of how to make a film. Again, in spite of the technical imperfections, these were made by people who were experienced in their fields. They know how to you could tell that they knew how to operate a camera. They knew how to compose a shot and how to block a scene and how to make sure that the exposures were right and everything, and that there was enough light to see everything. And it comes off, I think, for what it was, it comes off really, really well. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything more I can say about Carnival of Souls. So yeah, I would say that if you, this is definitely the best of the B movies, and this is not said. This is not said with irony. This is not one of those so bad it's good affairs. This was definitely in the well-made category. It's not perfect. There are some mistakes and some flubs and shortcomings, but I think for everything else that it has, I think it doesn't take away the mistakes. Doesn't take away from it. You can still enjoy it and get something out of it. So I definitely recommend it if you want to see a good B movie. If you think that B movies are just nothing but, if you think that all B movies are films that Ed Wood made, that Coleman Francis made, that became an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and then subsequently picked up by, and then other films that have been picked apart by other people. If you want to see a good example of a B movie, this is it. So yeah, Carnival of Souls. And until next time, take care.